So it's going to be a tough interview today, Jordan. It's going to be tough to do this podcast episode. It's really upsetting. I saw the footage, the really shocking, terrifying footage earlier of President Joe Biden having a little spill. He fell off his bike there. And it's going to be hard to focus on anything else because I'm just wondering, if he's doing okay. Really scary.
I'm heading over to Arlington National Cemetery here in a few minutes to pay my respects at the tomb of the unknown cyclist.
I didn't expect him to instantly turn to dust like that. I must admit, that's not my understanding of how human physiology works. But the footage doesn't lie. It was crazy.
I saw the video first. I think Hassan tweeted the video, and I thought first maybe this makes me a really bad person. I kind of chuckle whenever someone falls, myself included. I don't care. I'm totally down with self-deprecating humor. I'm like when people kind of stumble and fall, it's like, it's kind of funny. Whatever. It's not the big. If they got hurt, that's not funny. So I saw that and kind of chuckled. But then within minutes, literally minutes, it was. The right was just fucking running with it. This man is unfit to be president. And then the left was like, this somehow explains every worldview that I have. And it's like, this is just a perfect metaphor for our foreign policy or inflation or what. It's just I'm done. So I saw it. I had a joke tweet that I kind of replied with and deleted it because I wanted nothing to do with the online discourse around Biden's big spill.
Yeah. Well, this man's not fit to be president. It's like, well, as usual, I agree with that statement, but not for any of the reasons that you're saying that it is. I mean, it's the fundamental problem we always run into with these kind of things. Yeah,
right-winger, serial plagiarist, and just kind of all-around weirdo Benny Johnson has just been having a field day with it. At one point, very early in the day, Matt Binder, a friend of the show, had a screen recording just scrolling through Benny's Twitter feed, and it was no joke, very, very soon after this happened, had already had 40 tweets out about it. This was his Super Bowl.
Yeah, he was breathlessly reporting just a few months ago that the evil Trudeau communist regime was going to be overthrown by the noble truckers, and history books would remember their beautiful sacrifice. And lo and behold, that has not yet come to pass. Sometimes I'm not sure this guy's really got the best political analysis. I don't know.
No, he's a kook. But who's not a kook? Adam Conover.
Yeah, I love that.
Who joins us today on the show. That was such a good conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, that was really good stuff. We were just saying, not to disparage any of our previous guests. Okay, we love all our guests. It is nice. I will say this. It's nice to have someone who talks professionally for a living, to have them come on. It was a nice, again, we love our guests. Some of you need to do better though. Some of you need to pick it up.
Less.
Yeah.
Pick it up, Ken.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe this could be an example for some of the other, I don't need to name names besides Ken. I mean, we can, who you are.
That's a given. Yeah.
Yeah. You can just listen to this episode, listen to Adam talk about this kind of stuff. You maybe take a couple notes. The next time, hopefully we can kind of improve the guest situation. No, but it was a really great conversation. I'm really happy we were able to have him on. It was really cool to talk to him.
Just fantastic. And his show, The G Word with Adam Conover, is on Netflix now. I loved it. I think I told you about it when I was watching it. I just really wanted to get him on because the show is really, really entertaining and informative. We go through that show. We go through the progressive wins in Los Angeles and talk about the importance of getting involved in the local level, and not just kind of in a 10,000 foot view, as so many people, and definitely myself included, have just kind of thrown out at the end of a bitch session. Just this is all negative. Okay, yeah, just get involved at the local level. There's your solution. But Adam explicitly talks about the how and the why, and how it'll just change how you see your community, how you see politics, and how you ultimately see yourself. So it's a really, really good conversation. Listen through to the end. I think you'll really appreciate it. Before we get there, I want to remind people, the last episode with Judd Legum, the last premium episode, is really good as well. Judd tracks corporate donations to politicians, and right now in Pride Month, you see a ton of companies changing their profile pictures to rainbow flags. We all know it's insincere. We know it's bullshit. He tracks the dollars too. So we have a good conversation about that, get into a little of the January 6th hearing, and you probably remember corporations were pausing their donations to Republicans right after January 6th. So we talk about where those companies are now with their political donations. If you want to hear that, you can head to theinsurgents.substack.com, become a premium subscriber, get access to that premium episode and all the ones before it. And you'll just be supporting the show, which we appreciate.
Yes, we do. That's a good setup. Let's get to him.
Yeah. All right.
Let's do it. Adam Conover will be joining the program right after this.
And now we're joined by Adam Conover. Adam, we have a hardball question that we start these interviews off. We ask everybody.
Okay.
And the answer is critical to the success of this conversation. So it's your
picture
turn.
yourself. If you could picture yourself right now, it's like you're in one of those sinister offices where there's like a trap door under you, and our fingers are hovering over the trap door button.
Oh no. Okay. All right.
That's the level. That's what we're operating at right now.
Yeah. All right. Down the garbage
We don't
chute.
fuck around.
Unless I get this right.
Yeah. Or a vacuum tube. That would also work. Well, either one. Yeah.
Adam Conover, are you a gamer?
Yes. Oh,
Hey.
that was so easy.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. What have you been playing?
Let's see. I have been playing Elden Ring since it came out. I'm at 100 hours and I still haven't finished it because I'm doing sort of everything. Before I left on my recent tour leg, I'm out in Phoenix doing stand-up right now. Before I did that, I had just gotten to what I believe are the final couple bosses that I'm going to go fight. But I was also taking a short break to play a little V Rising, which is a vampire. It's like a kind of a cooperative Diablo vampire survival base builder. And it's pretty fun. So I've been, playing that. I try to sort of keep up with everything. I try to play literally everything.
Yeah. I've noticed that. I remember when Frostpunk came out, you were pretty quick on that. And Valdheim, you had that under your belt.
Valheim, great time.
You're a seasoned gamer.
I'm a seasoned gamer. Yeah. It's the greatest art form of the century. It's like being around. It's like being around for the birth of film, or would you really want to miss it? Would you really want to miss seeing Metropolis the first time it's in the theater? No, you wouldn't. You would want to be there for it. And that's how I feel about V Rising, the vampire survival base builder.
What do you think the best game you've played over the past 10 years is?
Oh, God.
Oh, boy.
The one that I said last time I was asked this question that I arrived at that I have the most admiration for is Outer Wilds is like a truly remarkable achievement. Have you played Outer Wilds?
I played I had like 10, 20 hours in it, and this was during the pandemic, and I can't remember why I stopped. But so I have a little bit of progress, but I remember it being beautiful. Really beautiful. It's
gorgeous. And now you know what we are talking about Outer Wilds, not Outer Worlds, which is a worse game.
Wait a minute. I'm in Worlds. I have not played Wilds.
Okay. I was like, it just sounds. I got 10 or 20 hours into it. I'm like, this sounds like you're talking about Outer Worlds, which is a shitty Fallout knockoff.
Yes, but it was beautiful.
I'm sure. But, the first time I played that game and it was like, hey, I'm the mutated gangster. Welcome to Mutated Gangster Town. You want to go clean the basement out of some rats? I was like, I'm not playing this shit. It's like, we don't need to be doing this. Outer Wilds is an incredible work of art, Jordan, that is Outer Worlds is this incredible game where it takes place in a tiny simulated solar system, and the solar system is like perfectly modeled. So you take off, it's like sort of Little Prince style planets. You take off in your spaceship in 3D and you go towards another planet and you start to fall under its gravity, and you can orbit it or you can land on it, etc. But the game is entirely a puzzle solving game. It's Myst style puzzles where it's environmental storytelling, and you land on the planet and you say, oh, how does this machine work? What happened here? Et cetera. And and the last little bit of the thesis is that the game is on a time loop. So these planets circle around the sun, however many times, and then after about 20 minutes or so, the game starts you over again, and you start to sort of learn how, okay, over the course of that 20 minutes, like this planet changes in this way. It starts to fall into a black hole, or it starts to get closer to the sun, or this or that happens, and you sort of start understanding how the planets act and using your knowledge of that to get further into the game. And the really cool thing about it is that all of the gatekeeping in the game, all the progress is not done by, in most games you get a key, you get an item, and that lets you get past the door. In this game, all of the progress you make happens in your own mind. You learn something new about the world, and then that allows you to move through it more fluidly, to unlock a door next time you encounter it. And so it's a game where instead of making you feel smart, it actually makes you be smart, because you actually end up learning about the world around you. And then it has just this incredible story about the end of the world and how one makes a life for oneself knowing that the world is about to end, which is like a really heavy theme, but is really like beautifully rendered. And it's a first time game by all the developers, which makes it like really remarkable. So it's just like, really, really, really top in video games in the last 10 years, I'd say.
Sounds awesome. That sounds really cool. Rob, have you played that?
No, I have not.
Well,
no.
You guys, so it turns out I'm the only gamer here.
Yeah, you are. You're making us look bad.
I'm going to edit all that out, all that insightful stuff you just said.
Smart.
Yeah.
I should be asking you, are you gamers? Apparently not.
Yeah, Fortnite counts.
Yeah, I haven't been gaming much lately. I did just see Lightyear today, though.
Oh, okay. That's a movie. You're aware of that.
Yeah. No, it's not a game. Not a game.
Okay.
But just in terms of the overall kind of pop culture chit chat before we dive into everything, that's where I'm at with that.
Oh, right.
Got it.
Right. That's like the groomer movie.
Yeah. It's the movie's fine, but that's the thing. I went with my kid, and now he instantly became a lesbian.
Wow.
Oh,
which is
okay. Yikes.
I guess that's how that works.
What is the gay moment in the movie that people are mad about?
It's the most fucking innocuous thing. It's truly amazing, I think, the extent to which people are. I mean, we went over this in the last episode, but just the extent to which people are getting very comfortable, criticizing any representation of any same-sex couple or any same-sex family or anyone that's even remotely part of the LGBTQIA spectrum is being presented as this like evil, insidious plot that's like harms kids. Just to like, and it's literally in the movie, it's probably it takes up about 45 seconds of overall screen time just suggesting that one of the characters is in a same-sex relationship, and that's all. It's just literally there. You get a few images of a family with two moms, and you get a few little glimpses of that, and that's it. That's the end of it.
And is either of these characters a main character in the movie?
Kind of. It's kind of in the. I don't want to get too far into spoiler territory for Lightyear in case you two are planning on seeing it. But
oh my god, is he a toy? It turns out he's a toy.
Yeah, the whole thing turns out.
Oh god,
that's the thing. I was very confused. I went to see it and I was like, "Where are the toys? I don't understand what's going on here." It's very confusing. No, but it's Buzz Lightyear's like Space Ranger partner in the opening like 15-20 minutes of the movie.
Okay,
is in a same-sex relationship, and it's not really a major plot point or anything. It's just a few seconds of screen time that suggests this, and you have conservatives now just losing their minds over the fact that this is,
yeah.
I don't know what the big problem is, but hey, okay.
I mean, it's the amount of like energy that is put into Disney's portrayal of LGBT characters is just like, why is this the only political battlefield left in America? Why are we spending all of our time on this? And the funny thing about it is that, like, to me, they are really getting both ends of the barrel. That metaphor makes no sense, but it's a mixed metaphor. But if you remember, because they've been taking shit for years from the LGBT community about their like really wimpy ass approach to doing representation. Like, do you remember how in they were like in the most recent Star Wars movie, the really really shitty one, where I can't remember anything about the movie, frankly, except for this moment. They're like, after they've like defeated, you know, the emperor for the last time, they've defeated him like for time number 6, and they're all celebrating. And then it just cuts to like Poe and Finn are like hugging each other or whatever. And then the background, it just cuts to 2 never before seen unnamed women in flight suits who you see from the back, and they kiss each other for like half a second. Just like literally two background actors, you know, are like, you two just like, you know, do like a stagey kiss as though you're in a high school play and you can't touch lips. Just like embrace in such a way that you might be kissing. But the camera lingered on it for just long enough that you could tell that they were like, does this make you happy? Look, a kiss. And I think they even tried to go like, we have the first on-screen gay kiss in a Star Wars movie. And people were like, what the fuck is this weak ass bullshit? This is nothing. This is less than nothing. This is worse than if you did nothing to try to like pass this off as representation. And so, you know, I think that's very funny. But then they try to like, okay, we'll drag our feet and like, fine, here's a photo implying a character is gay in a deeper way. And now Ben Shapiro fucking goes after them, you know? And it's just like, they're getting, you know, they should have a spine and actually do what's right, which is like showing representation. Sure, that's the right thing to do. But also like the amount of fucking, you know, nuclear weaponry of discourse that's aimed at these dumbass movies is just like completely out of proportion to anything.
Right. Like they're just doing it to be relatable and reflect your life, because it's just, we all know people who are in that community, and that's just life now. So Disney's just reflecting life in some ways. What people really wanted was Poe and Finn to be in a relationship, which would have been cool.
That would have been much more interesting.
Disney chickened out.
I mean, they chickened out of so many things in that movie.
Yeah, they chickened out on making Finn like a worthwhile character that contributes meaningfully to the story, which was kind of which was another flashpoint of like culture war stuff when he was first revealed to be the character. And of course, that resulted in this big racist backlash. And they failed even to turn him into a meaningful character in any way.
Yeah, they removed Kelly Marie Tran from the movie because like she had previously been in the previous movie quite a lot, and then she received like a racist backlash, and then Disney in response was like, oh no, racist people hate her, we better take her out of the movie. And in the next movie, they didn't just write her out of the movie. They like wrote a whole scene where another character is like, Rose Tico, you're not coming on the mission. Your job is shoveling manure now because you suck and everybody hates you. And then they have like a shot of her looking sad. And then she like, you know, throws up and slips her own barf and falls in a puddle of poop and everybody laughs at her.
Yeah.
You know,
breaks her neck.
Yeah, exactly. They just like murdered her on screen because some people on Twitter like didn't like her, which is the worst. I mean, Kelly Marie Tran is a friend of mine. She used to be on Adam Ruins Everything when we got started, and like then she was cast in a Star Wars movie, and I was like, oh, I'll never see her again. Goodbye, go off to, you know, celebrity land. And you know, that she was treated with such disrespect by them because they were like, the degree to which Disney allows themselves to be whipsawed by public opinion is like fully on them, you know, like fucking Rian Johnson, right? I liked his movie. If you don't like his movie, that's fine. At least the man made choices. That was the good one. It was interesting. It was weird. Luke Skywalker drinks
different than the rest.
Yeah, Luke Skywalker drinks alien milk from an alien tit. Awesome. I love it. Luke Skywalker is a piece of whiny bullshit. Yeah, because that's what he always was. He always sucked as a character. Yep. You know, like there was interesting stuff going on there. And then because the response to that, they just like retconned his entire movie. They just went like, no, that didn't happen. Everything that he set up in his movie actually, like literally.
Wait, you want to see Luke lifting up the X-wing with the Force powers? Look, now you get it in this movie, right? They see you should be happy now.
It's just
come on,
fan service. It's all fan service.
Yeah. Like, you know, when Ryan Johnson goes, you know, in his movie, what's her face? Ray, your parents are nobody, right? That's interesting.
Yeah, that was an interesting creative decision.
We're undoing all this bullshit of Star Wars where everybody has to be the child of anybody else to be interesting, you know? So we're just like, no, she's just her own person. And then at the beginning of the next movie, they're like, I am the emperor and I am back. And also your parents were nobody in the sense that they were my children. You know, like just trying to sort of rewrite the sentence from the previous movie. Doesn't even make sense that it would have been put that way in the movie. Like, it doesn't even make sense as canon. It's just like, fucking have a little bit of spine about your own fucking decisions, you know?
Yeah.
It's so pathetic.
Well, just the idea that like you have this big multi-billion-dollar franchise and there doesn't seem to be any plan for like a trilogy. And it's instead, rather than like having a basic story that carries through 3 movies, a basic outline, you end up being this multi-movie creative slap fight between different corporate interests and different filmmakers and stuff.
That's
like, who's this for? This is awful.
That's what was amazing to me about that. Because, and look, is this why you guys had me on the show, to do Disney Discourse like a year and a half late, 2 or 3 years afterwards?
We haven't talked enough about Last Jedi on the internet, I think. So we're trying to
well, here's what
rectify that.
Here's what fascinated me about the movie. It was almost like The Room, where you're like, I'm fascinated by how this came to be. How was this able to happen? Because to me, the whole promise of Disney was that, okay, they are resurrecting all your favorite properties from the grave, and they are doing it in a sheerly competent way. You like the Muppets? Here's the Muppets. They're back, and you're going to have them every single year until you die. The Muppets are never going away. You're just getting good enough Muppets forever, right? You like the Marvel characters? Here they are. There's a new movie once a month until you die. All the movies are good enough, you know? And like, they proved that. Like, the Marvel movies are like, you know, the whole cinematic universe stuff is done very deftly. The movies are like all a C+, but you know, you get high and you eat some popcorn, you're fine, you know, and you're like, oh, they all fit together. That's kind of neat. And so to me, the whole promise of it was that they were going to address these things with some amount of fan competency, that fans who constantly felt, oh, our favorite properties are not taken seriously by the industry and they're not given any attention and we're all always upset. Disney said, okay, we're going to do that for you. And then to see them fuck it up with the biggest property on such a massive scale in a way that like made no sense, even as corporate decision making, to do it that way. I was like, how did they suddenly get so stupid all at once? It was like incredible to me that it even happened. And what I am still craving is like, what's the oral history of like how that shit fucked up, you know? Who's the reporter who is going to go talk to all the executives and like get the real story of, you know, the behind the scenes battle of, you know, Ryan Johnson being made to walk the plank and, you know, and all that shit. Because it's bizarre that it went down that way.
Rob, anything else you want to add on Disney?
No. I mean, I think just to reiterate what we touched on last week when we talked about this, just how it's amazing how Disney.
You talked about this last week.
Well, just about the Hollow Pride overtures.
Yeah, and just the way that Disney has tried to walk this line between having this basic representation while also kind of trying to play both sides of the culture war, and how it just keeps on blowing up in their faces. And even when they try to make these pathetic, like these barely even there handouts to the marginalized communities to be like, here, look, you've got your representation in there too, so you should come too. And even with this bare minimum effort that they've made to be a little slightly more inclusive, it's still not enough for these like weird conservatives that all this culture war shit is all they care about.
Yeah. So
it's just it is kind of amusing watching them kind of flail and try and find this balance, which is just never going to exist.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it's also just makes it very clear how much, you know, the right is like. It's almost beyond culture war now. It's that they have now started an anti-civil rights movement, you know? And so they're just like, okay, if the left, or not even the left, if like, you know, marginalized people are going to, you know, make a claim for more inclusion, more representation, more voting rights, we are for the opposite of that. Like, we are going to march backwards on the bridge to Selma. You know, we are going to undo everything. And they're, you know, so they're doing it in a very targeted way. And it unfortunately seems quite successful, because you can't imagine that like Disney doesn't notice this shit. Like I think it's going to be effective, unfortunately.
Yeah, I saw today at the Texas GOP convention, they re-added a clause in the Republican platform there that explicitly condemns homosexuality as a repulsive behavior, or repugnant behavior, or lifestyle choice, something like that, after having previously removed it in 2016, I think. So yeah, to your point, they're just totally regressing on very, very small incremental things they did to avoid public scrutiny. But the floodgates are open. You've got people just straight up calling for violence against trans people. So yeah, Republicans see, hey, all right, it's fair game again. Let's go, which is horrifying.
Yeah, it'll take a better political studies professor than me to, explain what exactly is going on. But, to me, it was in my lifetime, the national shift on gay rights and gay marriage, it happened, when I was in high school. I had one friend who was out gay in the entire high school, and she was very brave to do so. And she started a chapter of PFLAG in our school, you know what I mean? And then I went to college and I had friends who were gay, but it was very much we're the insurgents, believing in gay rights, and then seeing the speed at which it, overtook the whole country. And, we achieved what felt like unity about it, to the extent that every corporation in America does pride events and shit, was astonishing to me, astonishing speed for that kind of social change, especially when, progress on civil rights for Black Americans has been so incredibly slow. It's just this very shocking contrast. But I never expected that we would see that progress just reverse so fast, and that we'd see one party just go yeah, no, we're doing the 90s again. We're going right back to that shit. And I'm not entirely sure why that is, or if it's going to be successful. I certainly hope it isn't, but it's it is really some holy shit stuff.
Right. But you are a good explainer of politics, and your new show.
Very nice.
Good segue, right? Thank you.
Oh, this is great.
And your new show, The G Word with Adam Conover, is on Netflix now. I just watched it last week, and just to kind of give you some context for how big of a TV person I am, I'm just now watching Breaking Bad. So the fact that I watched this just straight through in a day and a half, it's not super long, but that's a lot of TV for me. I loved it. I really, really loved it. Could you give listeners who haven't seen it yet an overview of what it is and what it's about and why they should watch?
Sure. So The G Word is a comedy documentary series about the government and how it works. So we tell you all the ways that the government affects your life, both good and bad, break down, parts of American life that are, literally upheld by government programs that most of us aren't aware of, or massive changes that happen in American history because of government programs that we're not aware of. And ways that the government affects our lives in bad ways. And we also go introduce folks. We do field pieces where I go meet, government employees who make the country run and have these crazy jobs. So I go to a Cargill meat processing facility, and we meet the meat inspectors who are on the line every single day, touching all of our meat, making sure it's not full of foodborne illnesses. And I fly through Hurricane Sam with a Air Force Hurricane Hunter plane, which they fly in order to, figure out where hurricanes are so that we can predict their motions and know when to evacuate low-lying areas. But we also talk, for instance, about how FEMA is so terribly structured and how it fails Americans time and time again. And then in the last episode, we make an effort to answer the question, how do we change our government when our government is not serving us or when it's hurting us, as it so often is?
The hurricane episode is so cool. I've always kind of wondered what the eye of a hurricane looks like, and in this show you see one. It's so cool. What was that like?
It was incredible. So we flew up with the Air Force Hurricane Hunters. NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, also flies into hurricanes, but we went up with the Air Force, and we actually had to go up twice because the first time we went up, the hurricane did not form. So we ended up flying around the Atlantic through a lot of turbulence, very, nauseatingly, but without getting any of the images we needed, or without being able to say that we actually flew through a hurricane. The second time we went up, we went through Hurricane Sam, which was a named storm, a full hurricane, but in 2021, it never made landfall, so it didn't really make the news much. But, it sort of swerved out right over the Atlantic. But, the Air Force still has to fly missions through the hurricane anyway, because the reason they do this is to measure wind speed and other conditions, and then specifically to find out where the exact center of the hurricane is. So as they're flying through, they're getting data and they're saying, okay, the winds are shifting this way, they're shifting that way, go a little left, go a little right. And the reason they do that is to try to find the exact center where the hurricane is totally still. And by doing that over and over again, they can calculate how fast the hurricane is moving. And that is why when you look at the Weather Channel and you see the hurricane, approaching the coast of Florida or Louisiana, and you see how it's moving over time and where it's going to move in the future. The only reason they have that data is because there is a plane at the moment you're watching flying through the hurricane over and over again. Then that plane lands when it runs out of fuel. A new plane takes off and does the same thing. It's fucking bonkers. So
it's amazing.
It's incredible. And so when we were flying through, I mean, it's amazing. You're flying through these like gray clouds. It's super turbulent. Most planes try to go around turbulence. This plane flies directly into turbulence so they can measure the turbulence. And it's this big cargo plane. There's almost no seating. You're just sort of walking around, grabbing onto metal bars when you need to, stepping over trip hazards, walking by. There's these, Air Force officers who are, work for the science team or the weather team, or whatever. They're all looking at radars and things. It's very much almost like a spaceship crew, if you can imagine, like in a normal, just because there's like literally somebody looking at like a spinning radar thing, like calling in coordinates to the pilot, So in any case, you're in sort of gray out conditions where you can't see anything. And there's like rain on the windshield and you're shaking all around. And then suddenly you break through the eye wall and it's suddenly completely clear. And you can see all the way up from the sky where there's sun streaming down, all the way down to the ocean where it's just blue below you. And then a mile in front of you, there's just a mile high wall of clouds stretching just up into the atmosphere. And it's spectacular. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. And it was such a privilege to go. It was like, felt like going to the moon or something, or to the bottom of the Marianas Trench, or, it's like going to see one of the most powerful natural forces on Earth. It's something I'll never get to do again in my life. Whereas these folks who work for the government, like, do it every single day.
Yeah, I thought that was just a really interesting and captivating way to illustrate, among the other things, the people who you would never know about and how they make the government run. But and on the topic of weather, that was the episode I think really blew me away. Because it was just the attacks on the National Weather Service. Mm-hmm. I had no idea this was happening. And one of the big players in that is AccuWeather. And they've done everything from, they're using, Weather Service data and information, and then they're trying to turn around and say, okay, but the government can't relay that to the public. We have to have a private middleman, and the consequences you lay out for that can be devastating. Could you talk about how this is happening? This private interference in a public good.
Yeah. So the National Weather Service, if you're not familiar, is it's a public agency. It has hundreds of weather observation posts employing thousands of scientists around the country, and they produce all the weather data and forecasts that you will ever see. Like, open an app on your phone, turn on the local news, look at that forecast. That forecast is coming from the National Weather Service. They are constantly monitoring conditions. They are analyzing it. They are, putting out, they call them products, different, weather forecast products. And those are freely available for anyone to use. So they're used by air traffic controllers. They're used by ships at sea. They're used by, amateur pilots. They're used by, all parts of the, various industries rely on them. And then, of course, the media, which, communicates them to the public and sort of fancies them up, adds some graphics, a broadcaster will read them on the news, etc. Now, your local meteorologist on your local news station has some meteorology training. They're probably interpreting some of the data themselves, right? But if the National Weather Service weren't there, that person would have no data to work from. Your local television station fundamentally is not a weather science institute. You know what I mean? It's a TV station. It's broadcasting data from the National Weather Service, as are the Weather Channel and AccuWeather. Both of those organizations, again, they have meteorologists who they employ. They do some data collecting on their own, but it's all on top of what the National Weather Service does. It's a sprinkling on top that differentiates their products from each other. And so what they are fundamentally doing, in a sense, is taking public weather data and public forecasts that we have already paid for via our tax dollars, and then they are asking the public to pay for them again as part of your cable package, or you buy a copy of USA Today, and USA Today is getting its weather report from AccuWeather, so you're paying for AccuWeather that way, right? And there's nothing wrong with that, because that's like what the data is for. It's a public good, and so if someone wants to resell it, they are certainly more than able to. But the problem is that AccuWeather, the company, has for decades seen the National Weather Service as competition, and they have worked to try to reduce the ability of the National Weather Service to communicate with the public directly. So Barry Myers, the CEO of AccuWeather, for instance, got himself a number of years ago on an oversight panel for either NOAA or the National Weather Service, I forget which, but he was on this panel, and he was able to kill the Weather Service developing a free public app. So like the Weather Service wanted to make an app that you could just use, right, to get your weather data, to get your weather forecast, and Barry Myers was able to prevent them from doing so. And let's be clear, this is not bad just because, you wouldn't have access to this app that, would give you the forecast you can get from some other free app. What's really bad about this is that the National Weather Service is primarily responsible for severe weather warnings and alerts. So there's a tornado on the way, there's a risk of severe flooding, etc. And in fact, if you just go to look at the Twitter account for your local National Weather Service, like the one in Los Angeles, the one in DC where you are, and you will see that they will, there are scientists there who are posting, hey, the next couple days, watch out for this red flag warning, or, floodwaters are going to rise, stuff like that. Like they're mostly concerned with making sure that people don't die. And so if we had access to that app, if you could add the National Weather Service app, you would be able to get those alerts much more easily, right? Instead of having them go through some middleman like Apple or whatever, right? So AccuWeather has been able to prevent them from doing that. And they have also, for years, tried to lobby for laws that would prevent the National Weather Service from communicating with anyone but commercial weather providers like AccuWeather. They famously got Rick Santorum, when he was still a senator, to sponsor a bill that would have prevented the National Weather Service from communicating directly with the public. And that bill was killed, but it was like very clearly, sponsored directly by AccuWeather. And then most recently, Barry Myers tried to get himself appointed to as the head of NOAA, and by Trump, and which. He's like, oh, yeah, he's the CEO of AccuWeather. He should know something about the weather, right? Except that his whole goal was to privatize the Weather Service. Now, that appointment never went through. And I don't know exactly why. My guess would be there's enough senators in Congress who know what the Weather Service does, right? And that we need the Weather Service as an apolitical, non-privatized entity because everyone relies on it so fucking much. And there is a little bit of, in Congress, institutional support for things like that still. If you go ask even some of the crazier senators, they know that shit, right? But it hasn't stopped it from being a war that they've waged, and they've actually, been able to stop the Weather Service from communicating with the public. And the last bit about this is that, there are examples of times when AccuWeather has issued tornado warnings that were only available if you could pay for them. So like literally if you're a paying AccuWeather subscriber, it's absurd, right? There's a tornado coming, but only if you pay us $10 a month do you get to find out, right? And
what I think you're overlooking here, though, Adam, is that it's the same thing as counting COVID deaths. If you want COVID cases to go down, you just stop counting them. If you're concerned about climate change, just stop paying attention to what the weather is, and then you're not. Yes. It's fine. You're not going to be able to tell. So
very good point.
Really, I think
Perhaps we could cut down on all these damaging tornadoes if people just didn't know about them. Absolutely.
Yeah, precisely. There's a genius to it that I think you're missing. Sorry to interrupt you with my totally inane contribution.
No, not at all. Not at all. I was going to say the point of this show is to sort of, is to demonstrate that there are certain things that only the government can provide. Public goods like this can only be provided by the government. No private entity can fly planes through hurricanes or run, a weather data collecting apparatus on the scale that the government can and distribute it to the public for free. That is not something that a capitalist business is capable of doing, and it is something that needs to be done. So it's something that we need the government to do, yet that duty is under threat all the time. And it's under threat from private businesses. It's also under threat from, structural problems. We talk about, for instance, in that same episode, how FEMA is misstructured as an agency, which means it has failed time and again to, as we say, even bring bottled water to people who need them in Puerto Rico. How is it possible our government can fly a plane through a hurricane but can't bring bottled water to Puerto Rico? It's because FEMA is misstructured as an agency. If we were to fix those problems, we might have the agency that we need. And then the government is also, undermined by the campaign, the dedicated campaign to make us lose faith in our government. The folks who have preached privatization and have preached a smaller government and have said the government can't do anything. That's a propaganda campaign that we've lived under since the Reagan years, and it's been enormously successful. And so we're trying to push back against that and to, tell folks, like, here's why what the government does fucking matters.
And I think it's like it's important right now to be demystifying some of that, considering how important, not just to the conservative movement, but to sort of the neoliberal movement in general, has been to kind of demonize the very idea of government doing anything at all, or to suggest that anytime the government is involved in anything, it's automatically inefficient, bureaucratic, it doesn't work. And I think people have really internalized that idea. Like a lot of people across the political spectrum, I think mainly conservatives, but it's not an exclusively conservative phenomenon. So I think it is really important to, I think, have a way to point out to people that these functions are actually extremely important. And like you point out, this gap can only be filled by the public sector. And there's not these private sector solutions to all these different problems.
Yeah. I mean, the idea that the government is inefficient and ineffective has just been in the water that we've drank for the last 50 years. As I say on the show, I remember my mom saying to me as a kid, the government is a lot less efficient than private businesses. I just remember her saying that. And that was just something that she had absorbed from just, watching television, right? From just reading Newsweek. It was just an idea that was out there. And it's because we've been living under the Reagan regime since the 80s, when Reagan won, literally not every state. He won 48 states or something like that in 1980. And then again 4 years later. The reason was this idea just spread very popularly that we had too much government, and we've been living with it, and it's a meme, it's an ideology that we need to start chipping away at and pushing back on, because it's not true and it's very harmful to our way of life.
Yeah. So you have been, I think, making the rounds, talking to different organizations and parts of the federal government and at different aspects of the bureaucracy. How has this been received? Because I went to graduate school and got an MPA, and that was all I focused on, right? It was just, how do we make the government better? How do we make it more efficient? And it was at a public school with a public interest focus. So it wasn't how do we celebrate public-private partnerships? It's the bureaucracy is good. How do we make it better? And you could just sense the frustration among the professors, among my classmates, that people are tired of this type of attack, starting with Reagan and through now on the government and all of these characteristics you both laid out that they try to demonize it with. That frustration, I feel is probably even more prevalent in the government and in these organizations itself. So how has this show, and in your interactions with them, how is it being received? I would imagine they're deeply appreciative.
Most of them are, yeah. There's only one agency that's not happy with us, and that's the USDA, because we showed both the incredible work that the USDA does in our nation's meatpacking facilities, that, we have meat inspectors on the line who are there every single day making sure the meat is not diseased, which I think is still a remarkable intervention. I mean, American factory farming is an abomination, but the fact that we are not constantly getting E. coli from it is because back in the 1920s, we made this decision to force every single meat packer in America to have government employees on the line monitoring them every single day. And those employees literally have the ability to hit a big red button and stop the line whenever they want. They can literally shut the factory down at any point in the day when they see something that's wrong, right? And that is like, by today's standards, a pretty remarkable feat, right? If you looked at if you propose doing that for any business that's fucking with people today, imagine, saying, hey, we're going to send government inspectors into Facebook every single day to make sure that, Facebook isn't like, fomenting racism, or we're going to send government inspectors into Tesla every single day to make sure that Tesla isn't lying to NHTSA about its self-driving cars, or pick any company, right, that is like doing some malfeasance like this. You'd be laughed out of the room. People would say this is un-American, yet we did it to the meat industry. The system is still in place, and it is, as a result, we're not dying of foodborne illnesses. So we make that case. But we also then go on to talk about how the USDA is, captured in many ways by the big agriculture industry, how they give subsidies to crops that are, making us unhealthy, about how they're engaged in pilot programs to reduce the number of inspectors at the request of the industry. A lot of problems like that. So USDA overall is a little bit like, they don't. There's people there who maybe don't love the show as much because we called them out. The other agencies are like thrilled, the FDIC, who we talk about their incredible work regulating the banks, the National Hurricane Center, NOAA. These are people who, don't get the opportunity to tell their own story the way that they wish they could. One really fascinating thing is that if you go on the internet, if you go to nasa.gov, you will see the best website you've ever seen, right? You will just geek out about space. There's like news, there's photos, there's videos, right? NASA is just fucking awesome. And the reason is that NASA, part of the purpose was always a PR exercise from the beginning. The point of NASA was to show off how great the American government is in our, sort of like PR war against Russia. And that's continued to this day. So as a result, NASA has like a PR budget. They have a marketing budget. They are able to make their logo famous and awesome. But the other agencies are never given that money. They're never, no one in Congress is approving them to, spend $10 million just explaining why the National Weather Service is great. And as a result, we don't know that what these agencies do. And so they were very happy for us to come in, on Netflix with, by the way, the Obamas executive produced the show. So with them as executive producers, all of that weight behind us, elevating their work and showing it to people.
They produced this show as well. So that's a little crossover.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, they produced your show.
Yeah. Even
fans,
in the family. Yeah.
That's really cool. I didn't know you guys were liberal shills too. That's awesome.
Big time.
Of course.
And I can address that quick. I never like to bring that up without saying this, by the way, that when I started doing the show, so this show came about because Barack and Michelle Obama optioned Michael Lewis's book, The Fifth Risk. Michael Lewis, the wonderful journalist. I had read the book previously, and they said, hey, do you want to come in and pitch on the book? And I was like, of course I do. The book's incredible. And I came in and pitched on the book, and we decided to go ahead and do the show together. And when we started, I made clear to them, like, I need editorial independence when I make the show, because I can't be seen. This show will not work if it is seen by the audience as being, Obama machine propaganda, which is what most people will think it is, unless you make it clear that it is not. And they understood that and granted it. And we did a scene about that at the beginning of the show, making that clear to the audience. And there's a lot of portions in the show where, like, we are critical of the Obama administration, or certainly taking angles that are different than what, Barack Obama would want to say on such and such a topic. And as a result, it is a show that, I feel we were able to, my standards, to be able to, tell these stories with integrity, in the same way that when I was doing Adam Ruins Everything on True TV, we were doing stories about advertising, even though we were on advertising supported television. There's no ethical consumption under capitalism, and no pure media production either. You just do the best you can. And I think we were able to do a good job here, making sure that we were not polluted by, the political process. But, folks can watch at home themselves and be the judge of that.
One of those topics, though, you did talk about the research that came out of, I think, DARPA, that led to drones, which led to the drone program, and that is something that is a stain on Obama's legacy. I mean, that's just, I think, like you're saying, it's kind of tough to navigate in that scenario, but to include that when I know that's something that they don't want a lot of people to remember, that was in there, and you explicitly talk about the rise during that period when he was president.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because it came naturally out of that episode. We're doing an episode about military technology and about how, the government has invented so many of the incredible innovations that have transformed our lives, like GPS, like the internet, and like drones. But they were all created for the purpose of warfare, for the purpose of killing people. That's like the thesis of that episode. And that's like something that we should feel very conflicted about as Americans, that GPS has transformed my life massively for the better. It's one of the greatest inventions in human history, like bar none, absolutely. But at the same time, it was invented to help target missiles. And so how do I feel about that as an American? The fact that that's what my money goes towards, the fact that, that is where all of my wonderful things came from. And drones happen to be one of the best examples of that because, they've democratized the skies for millions, right? And also made it a lot more annoying to be at the park, but because someone's always flying a drone around. But at the same time, drones have killed thousands of civilians, and they've invented a new kind of aerial warfare that wasn't even possible before, because now a strike can be ordered without having to risk somebody's life, and as a result, those strikes are ordered a lot more often, and that's fucked up. That's not the story Obama would choose to tell, right? He's on the record about his drone program. You can go find countless clips on YouTube. You can find him, you can find a college student yelling at him about it at a town hall, and then Obama talks for 15 minutes about, well, here's my position, and here's why I think we made the best choice we could at the time, and blah, 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 and he does his thing, right? And, we've heard that. And, unfortunately, I don't think that it's a response to the criticism that we give. Frankly, our criticism of the drone program is like a very mainstream one. It's something that, really anybody who studies the topic arrives at. And so, there was a point as we were making the show where, his staff who we work with were like, well, this isn't the Obama line on drones. And we were like, yeah, we know. We disagree with that, and that this is what we're doing, and that's what is in the show. So for me, when I'm doing one of these topics, I like a fight. I sort of like to find the topic where when the show comes out, what is the thing that people are going to say? No way they're doing this on the show. No way they're doing this on the show. And in this case, that was drones. And it was very fun for me because when when the show announcement came out, we were already deep into working on the scripts. And people would tweet at me like, oh, you're working on a show with Obama, huh? Where's the segment about drones? Bet you're not going to do a segment about drones. And I was just like, just you fucking wait, motherfuckers. Yeah, we are. I'm working on that script today. So, and that's the only thing I can do is pick the biggest fight I can and go to the wall for it and try to win. And that's how I sleep at night doing what I do, Nice.
Well, yeah, I mean, definitely very admirable considering I think a lot of people in that position would feel very uncomfortable exploring that. So,
most people wouldn't even try.
Yeah.
They would just say, oh, hey, I love Obama. Yeah, whatever you want. Well, how can I make you happy? And to me, my process was more like, how do I piss him off? Because if we're not doing that, then we're not doing it right. And
it would give people, I think, an excuse to write off a lot of the very important points you're making on the show if they felt like you were involved in some kind of it's a whitewashing of that kind of policy, and it gives it credibility. And then if people were able to kind of write it off that way, they wouldn't be able to take away any of the other lessons that you're trying to impart on people.
Yeah. It's like, look, if Netflix had come to me and said, hey, you want to make this show without Barack Obama, it would have been a little bit simpler, but that was the position I was in. I had the opportunity to tell people these stories and do it with Barack Obama's name on it. And I was like, all right, that's a different project. It's going to be more challenging, but here's how we do it in a way that, still works and still has integrity. And it was my job to make that happen,
And you end on an uplifting note. You talk about the importance of getting involved at the local level. And, sure, the show is about how the federal government works, but you make an impassioned case to the viewers that they need to get involved at the local level because there's a ton of things that affect you and change your day-to-day life that people don't even want to pay attention to. And, local newsrooms are dying. They're really struggling to keep up, if they even have them anymore. They're being bought out by major companies and just gutted. And there's so few people to even track local governments and like city halls and county administrators and all these different types of things that really have a big impact on your day-to-day life and can change for the better or for worse just by participating in local elections. Yeah. And I think that was a perfect example to bring up because also now in Los Angeles, I know you're super involved at the local level in Los Angeles, and we're on the heels of some big progressive wins in LA, which is just awesome. So could you talk about the case you make in the show and also why we should be celebrating the elections in California and Los Angeles right now?
Yeah. So where I end up in the show in the final episode is it kind of mirrored my own personal crisis, because I spent, I've been making Adam Ruins Everything since 2015. And, when I started my career, my goal was to just raise awareness of issues, right? I was like, if I can just talk about this shit on TV, that's going to make a difference, stuff that people don't normally talk about. And then, as we were making this show, I was like, hold on a second. I've been talking about some of these issues for years. So has everybody. And we haven't seen change on them. We wrote this season in the wake of George Floyd's murder and the protests around the country about criminal justice. And I was sitting in LA going, like, I'm watching, the cops tear gas people. And it's been 30 years since Rodney King. This is the same shit that people have been demanding for years and years. People have been saying the LAPD is hurting and killing us for years and years, and they still are, and we haven't seen that change. Mass incarceration. I've been, I did it. I covered it on Adam Ruins Everything 2 or 3 times in 2016. And where's the change? And so I started to really get upset and say, well, I can't just talk about this shit anymore. I want to figure out what the hell we do about it when the government is so big and we are so small. And the answer that we found when we set our research team on it is that so many of these problems are actually local problems on the local level. So criminal justice, for instance, is fundamentally not a national issue. The federal prison population is not that large. The federal law enforcement is, not what's causing our racist mass incarceration system. It's part of it, but it's the minority of it. It's state and local jails and prisons that people are locked up in. And the number one official who's making the difference in those is your county district attorney or your city district attorney or your state attorney. And those are much smaller races, and nobody is voting in those races. Most district attorneys are elected unopposed. And their turnout for those races is incredibly low. I mean, the turnout for mayor's races is low. Imagine how low, races are for district attorney. But literally, if you look at what, drives mass incarceration, it's these tough on crime district attorneys who do things like, they set policies that say, okay, we're going to try 15-year-olds as though they're adults. We're going to pursue maximum sentences for everyone who has an eighth of weed in their pocket. We're going to, do gang enhancements so that anybody who's in a gang database, which is basically every black person in most cities, is, going to get extra years just because they are listed in some database as being in some gang, after they're picked up for a traffic stop or whatever the fuck. This is the policy of district attorneys. And that means that on some level, we, the voters, have been voting for these policies. And that, I don't just mean white voters. That's true of all voters. There's an incredible professor named James Foreman Jr., Pulitzer winner. He wrote a book called Locking Up Our Own about, I've interviewed him on my podcast Factually, about how, even in black communities of color, these sort of prosecutors were very popular for a very long time because it was just sort of the American consensus that this is the way that we should handle crime. But we're starting to realize that, that had disastrous results. As much as people want to blame, let me just say, Biden's crime bill, right, from the 90s, it's a bad bill and it had disastrous results. But it was a wave that was also affecting every single jurisdiction locally as well. We were all voting for this shit back then. But what all of this means is that if we want to change mass incarceration, we can do it locally. We can do it locally just by voting differently in local elections. And by more importantly, this is not a go vote argument. It's an argument for organizing on a local level, building movements on a local level that can actually flip these seats. And so we go profile, for instance, Reclaim Philadelphia, which is a group that in Philly came out of the Bernie Sanders campaign there after the 2016 election. All those organizers sort of looked around and said, okay, how do we build a movement in our own community? And they built the movement that got Larry Krasner elected in Philadelphia, who's the reformist DA, formerly a public defender. And he is transforming criminal justice in that city. He is refusing to try minors as adults. He's refusing to throw people in prison for life for drug convictions, stuff like that. And he's coming under incredible attack from right wingers, from reactionaries, from affluent white folks. But they have built such a durable movement there that they got him reelected, and they are frankly taking over the politics of their city and transforming it. They can be a model for the entire country. And so bringing me to LA, part of the reason we did that story is over the last couple of years, I've gotten more and more involved in local politics here in Los Angeles for the same reason that I've realized, oh my God, I can make a huge difference in my community just by working locally. And my experience with that came from being involved in Nithya Raman's campaign for CD4, the district I live in here in Los Angeles. She was running as a true progressive, as someone who wanted to reimagine policing, who wanted to take a compassionate, evidence-based approach towards homelessness, and all sorts of other things. And she was trying to boot out, an entrenched establishment, do nothing, corporate Democrat who took realtor money and corporate money and, was part of this whole culture of corruption and, placating affluent white homeowners that existed on the LA City Council. The LA City Council has just been full of the stupidest, most corrupt, most do-nothing politicians you've ever heard of, right? Just people who have basically run on the public not knowing who they are. That's been their entire MO, is to just fly under the radar, get rich people to back them, and get reelected and make a lot of money. Like in the last 5 years, like 2 or 3 city council people have been indicted for like just massive corruption by the FBI and shit. Really bad stuff. So she ran like a people-powered organizing-based campaign against him, knocking on doors, getting the vote out, and specifically just educating the public as to, hey, guess what? There's a person called a city council person, and here's what they do. Here's how much power they have in your community. City council people have a lot of power in LA because of the structure of city government. And they're basically like tiny mayors. And here's what they do, and here's the amount of change that we can make. And I put a lot of time in 2020 into her campaign. Instead of, worrying about national politics, I worried about local politics instead. I made phone calls for her. I knocked on doors. I did fundraisers, et cetera, et cetera. And I got involved in different, community affinity groups. And we got her elected. She won. It was incredibly empowering to see her do that. And then things started to get better in our district. Like I work with a homelessness group in my area, a neighborhood homelessness coalition. We go around on weekends and hand out bottled water and food and try to connect people with services. We're just volunteers, right? Just on the ground folks going out trying to like make sure people aren't dying on the street. And I saw literally in the district that I'm doing my route on, I saw encampments start to disappear, not because she was shifting them from one area to another with the cops, like all the other city council people are doing, but because they were sending like teams of 5 city workers, 5 people from her office to those encampments together to ask people, hey, what do you need? What kind of housing are you looking for? And using the power of the city council person's office to get them placed in permanent housing. And so they were able to clear entire encampments and get people housed. Whereas in the other district, literally across the street, because I live on the border between the two, the encampments were still there because the idiot in the other district was just, sending the cops to rough people up like they always had, and nothing was changing. So that was the background. What we have seen in the year since was, first of all, since 2020, a big backlash, a big reactionary right-wing backlash of wealthy white homeowners saying, we don't like this progressive, we're going to try to get her recalled. They launched a recall campaign against her. They launched a recall campaign against George Gascon, who is our progressive prosecutor here in Los Angeles, our Larry Krasner, this guy George Gascon, who's doing much the same thing here as Larry Krasner was doing. Those recalls have failed, though. And what's turned out to happen is that this election cycle in 2022, we've had a brand new crop of progressives run based on what Nithya did. There's a fellow named Hugo Soto Martinez in CD13, who is a labor organizer. He's formerly with Unite Here, the incredible hospitality union that is incredibly well organized and does incredible things for their members. He's running. We had a woman named Eunices Hernandez running in CD1, who has been the power behind some recent local ballot measures that redirected money from the sheriff's department into, actual services. She ran. There's a fellow named Aaron Darling who's running in CD11, which is Venice. And a couple of other races as well. Oh, and a man named Kenneth Mejia, who is running for city controller. And what's ended up happening is we just had the primary election, and it's taken a while to count the votes because we've gone to all mail-in ballots here in LA. But every single time more votes are counted, we have more and more wins in the progressive column. And all of those candidates are winning their primaries. Most of them are going to runoffs, but one of them, Eunices Hernandez, is not going to a runoff because there are only two people running in the race. And she has actually beat Gil Cedillo, who's the previous establishment candidate who, very much sucked, but, is very entrenched in the community. She has just today declared victory over him. And let me just be clear how big a deal this is, because first of all, Nithya and these other candidates, they needed, the primary and the general to win. They came in, Nithya, her year, came in a strong second in the primary and then pulled ahead in the general. Eunices just won on the primary, like on the first ballot. And second of all, she is running openly as an abolitionist. She is a police abolitionist. She says that on her website. She says it verbally when she's campaigning, but she explains what that means to people. She says that means investing in services that, will stop crime before it starts, and, correcting the social ills that lead to, problems such as crime and homelessness. And she fucking won on that. And it's like an incredible come from behind underdog victory, but it also shows that here in LA, we have had wins lead to more wins and lead to a real progressive, starting to look like a wave in the city. And I mean, all of us who are working as part of this movement are just fucking thrilled about it. It's incredible. So I've talked for a while. You guys, one of you guys asked me something.
Kenneth Mejia's campaign, I thought, really was great on public education of his role and what the controller does. Yeah. Just straight up billboards showing where all the money goes. Because it's one thing to say, oh, we want to defund the police. And it's one thing we want to say, oh, we want to cut back on excess spending and this and that. Those are abstract terms to 99% of people. So he would just put bar graphs on a billboard. And it's this is what they're spending on you. And this is what they're spending on X, Y, and Z. I think this should change, just straightforward. And it worked. I would and people were sharing them all the time because it was different. But when you show people just how disproportionate the amounts are for things that go into, the police versus social services or investing in the community, any reasonable person is going to be upset by that. So I thought he did a really, really good job. That was spectacular. I'm really excited that he and all of these other progressives won.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And part of what works so well about his campaign is that, look, the truth about the city controller's office, it doesn't have a lot of power in the city of Los Angeles. Now, that doesn't mean he can't turn it into a position that has more power, because that's part of the soul of politics, is taking a position that people think is powerless and turning it into something. But the city controller's office is really, it issues reports. But the thing that he did as a candidate was he started issuing reports. He started looking into public data, filing, the city equivalent of FOIA requests, getting data and publicizing it. He put together maps, that you can see data on. He did billboards with the data on it, like you said. And as a result, he started educating the public as to where the money goes, to such an extent that the LA Times, when they endorsed him, and by the way, they endorsed him over a 3-time city council person who this dude, Paul Koretz, thought he was going to win in a walk, right? Because he's I'm a fucking former city council person. Why wouldn't I win? I'm just going to move from one job to another. But Mejia not only beat him in the primary, but was endorsed by the LA Times over Koretz. And the LA Times' endorsement was yeah, Kenneth Mejia is the best person for the job because he's already doing it. Like he's already chewing up the data and putting it on billboards and publicizing it to people. And that's what you want a city controller to do. So it seems like he'd be a pretty good one. And that Kenneth, to be real clear, before this, he was not in politics at all. You know, he was a Green Party activist and a couple other things like that. You know, he was like involved sort of as an advocate, but he was not a, part of the, city's political scene until he ran this incredibly innovative campaign that really mobilized people and got them excited about the position. And it was fun. It made it fun to be a part of politics. He has so much energy behind him. It's incredible. And that's just one race among many. And by the way, another one is Karen Bass, who's running against Rick Caruso. That has gotten a lot of headlines recently.
Yeah. Yep.
And a couple weeks ago, I was one of the many people who felt that Rick Caruso seemed likely to win because Rick Caruso is blanketing the county in ads. And the ads are like pure Ronald Reagan. He's smiling. He's in a sweater. He's all tanned. And he's like, I want to clean up LA and we're going to do it together. And it if you don't know anything about the mayor's race, sounds pretty good. People are like, yeah, seems kind of dirty. He'll make the people I don't like go away and he'll do it with a smile on his face, And that seemed like that would be an appealing message to people. And Karen Bass, I'll be honest, she has not run as a progressive. She's run as a semi-progressive, but she's sort of not really, in my mind, given as strong as she could have a vision of here is how progressive policies could actually make Los Angeles a better place to live. However, she is certainly the more progressive of the two of them. And every time more votes are counted, more and more votes going to go into her column. And so despite the fact that she was outspent like 10-1, she is still handily beating Caruso in the primary. They're going to go to a runoff. It really is starting to feel like we have built like a movement here in LA that is based around educating the public as to what their local government does and telling them, patiently and compassionately and entertainingly why these policies will work and why they matter. And the public is responding. Like it's starting to really look like a movement. Now, maybe you talk to me a year from now, I might be like, the sky is falling. The reactionaries are undoing everything, Could be. That's how I felt a year ago after Nithya's victory. I was really worried. But, what I've seen has given me a lot of faith in our ability to create a movement that makes local change.
What did you make of the recall of Chesa Boudin in San Francisco? Now that you've had this positive spin, I can take things back to the depressing, pessimistic side. But that's an example. You mentioned Krasner and the kind of reactionary forces that are trying to undermine what they're doing, and that you saw that kind of be successful in San Francisco, and in the idea of even trying to tackle these criminal justice issues in a slightly more humane way. And you saw a coalition of reactionary forces and the media and powerful business interests and political leaders come together to ensure that wasn't going to be possible. What was your takeaway from that?
Yeah, I was really down about it for a bit. To me, it was, that we had good news here in LA on election night. And, I was the guy at the election night party telling people, oh, Chesa Boudin got recalled. And people were like, stop harshing our vibe, man. We're happy tonight. And the news has only gotten better since. I think a lot of progressives don't yet realize that when it comes to criminal justice reform, defunding or redirecting funding from the from the police departments to services is important, but it's not going to happen in an instant, right? And one thing we need to do, actually, James Foreman Jr. told me this on my podcast. He put this really well. We need to build those systems that we're talking about. We need to start building programs that will actually, cure social ills, stop crime before it starts, et cetera, if we want to make the case that we should spend less money on police, right? So that's like a really long-term goal. But for right now, if you want to fight mass incarceration, you want to fight the negative effects on criminal justice in communities now, the real game is the prosecutor's office. That is like that's the alpha and the omega of criminal justice reform in many ways because of how powerful these positions are. And one thing that's disappointing to me is I have not yet seen progressives actually understand that to the degree I think they need to, and that's part of why we made this episode. Which was episode 6 of the G Word, is like almost entirely about how important the prosecutor's office is to anything that you care about in criminal justice reform. So it was really disheartening to see Boudin booted that way. And it's also been disheartening to see a lot of rhetoric on criminal justice reform roll back. I'm really struck by how, at Joe Biden's first State of the Union, or maybe it's not technically a State of the Union, it's like first joint address to Congress. He said, something along the lines of, we need to, make sure that, our Black Americans are not, the victims of violence at the hands of police, right? He said that in early 2021. And by the following year, he was saying, we will not defund the police. We will refund the police,
Yeah.
And I'm like, God, that's
you,
the fastest 180 I've ever seen. Right. And look, we don't need to get into some argument about the wisdom of the phrase defund the police. We can just point out that like a year prior, this was one of the biggest issues in Democratic politics. And then he didn't mention it a year later. Right. And, we've seen a media fervor, a reactionary fervor around, rising crime rates. Now, half of the media fervor is made up about, like flash mobs that are stealing Rolexes and shit like that. Or these freight train robberies that were actually due to those freight trains cutting their security services. And a lot of it has also been not crime, but people being upset about poverty being visible on the streets. Homeless encampments and things like that are constantly conflated with crime. There has been an increase in crime on a lot of statistics, but all those forces together have like really seemed like they've eroded, the prospect of criminal justice reform. And that's really upset me. And I've been really down about it. But in the culminating the recall of Boudin, right? But in the weeks since, I've come to appreciate that actually, if you look around the country, if you look around the rest of California, there are progressive prosecutors winning races all over California, just in less famous counties, just in counties that don't make the New York Times. George Gascon, they've been trying to recall him ever since he was elected 2 years ago. So far, they haven't been able to collect the signatures. Like, maybe we should start worrying once they're able to. Now, I am worried about his reelection in 2 years. I think we need to like sort of build an awareness in the public of like how important this role is and start telling the stories of what the reforms are doing. But maybe the situation isn't that dire. Larry Krasner, they tried the playbook on him. He was reelected in a rout. He was reelected like 65% or something like. I think that what we're dealing with is there's an inbuilt media narrative that it's the weirdest thing you'll ever see, because you will open a newspaper and you'll see an editorial that says mass incarceration is a stain on our society. We need to do everything we can to end mass incarceration. And you'll see it right next to an article about angry voters are yelling at the local district attorney for being too lenient, And it's like, okay, what the fuck is going on here? What's going on is that there, as much as we need this change, there is a deep, deep strain, deep built-in narrative in our media, in our own psyches, that demands a tough on crime attitude, and that has an immediate reaction whenever we have less than that. But I think the media narrative might be a bit overblown. I think that the public, when they're presented with the ideas, I think they actually maybe are still going for criminal justice reform. Certainly, the primary election in LA has given me a lot more faith on that.
Should we end it on a positive note, Rob, for once?
Well, it's worth a shot. We might as well do something different every now and then,
Yeah, we're usually on a really down note.
Can I say one last thing?
Yeah, of
Please.
course.
This is something I'm trying to spread. Is that and it's something I sort of wish I had said directly in the show. So I'm sort of trying to say it in my interviews. Which is that like a lot of people are mistaking my message for a go vote local message. Right? That like, hey, you should just show up and vote differently in local elections. And we do say that because that's the entry point of activism for most people, is voting. But the thing that is really transformative in my view is getting involved in organizations in your area. It's joining your union and showing up to, if you're in a union, showing up to, that committees and being a part of its political action. Maybe it's your church. Maybe it's the local chapter of the DSA. Maybe you and some friends take over your local Democratic Party office, right? Maybe it's, there's all kinds of, maybe it's your local Sunrise Movement, et cetera, et cetera. And that to me is what's really transformative, because it's really easy to be, depressed and pessimistic when you're sitting around on Twitter all day. But when you are actually showing up to meetings on a weekly or even monthly basis, you're meeting other people who care about the same issues you do. And you're talking with them, and then they say, oh, hold on a second, Jordan, you show up to this a lot. Do you want to help us plan this event we're doing next week? And you say yes. You will be too busy to be depressed because you'll have too much shit to do. And that's what I really try to encourage people to do. I think that is how we really make change. And the reason is that's how the right wing has done it. That's how they've rolled back abortion rights. That's how they're doing. That's how, that's how they kill gun control, is by joining those groups and showing up and yelling at people every single day. And we can do the same thing.
And I would also just say that another thing people can do is subscribe to this podcast, as well as me and Jordan's Twitch streams. That is also doing politics, and it's going to make you feel better about the way that the direction that America and the rest of the world is going.
If you want to reach a new level of leftism, you have to watch The G Word on Netflix. That's just, I think that's in capital. I'm just telling you.
Yeah.
I mean, I love that you guys are even making that joke, because the number of people who think leftism means like arguing about Jimmy Dore on a Twitch chat. You know what I mean? Or like talking about like the Young Turks and Sam Cedar and like Steven Crowder and like this weird like micro universe of like non-political celebrities who are just like microcasting is like, this is not activism. This is not politics. Right. It's fun. You can have some fun doing it, but like get opinion. The fuck outdoors, that's my opinion. Yeah.
No, absolutely. Yeah. Like I am so tired of that whole world. But here's the thing. I hate to rain on your parade, Adam. You say it's not politics, but
it's going to be politics pretty soon.
You must not have heard the news, because there is a draft Jimmy Dore for president campaign brewing.
Wow, for president?
Yeah, out of the People's Party.
Incredible. Yep. Look, I have to share a bill with that guy sometimes at Flappers and listen to him to do 15 minutes of anti-vax stand-up comedy. So, I think he's the vaccine. They don't tell you. It kills you. It's like 15 minutes of that in front of a bunch of, very, very nice drunk comedy fans in Burbank. I think he'll do great on a convention stage, is what I'm saying.
All right. Well, everyone who listens to this show, you're obligated to put in at least 5 hours knocking on doors for Jimmy. Adam will be out there kind of doing the canvassing launch. So we appreciate you for that, Adam. And we appreciate your time joining us today. Where can people outside of the G Word find you and your work?
Well, you can listen to my podcast Factually wherever you get your podcasts. It's I interview a different expert from around the world of human knowledge or activism or journalism or science every single week. And you can find me at Adam Conover, anywhere that has @ symbols.
Nice. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. I had a blast.
Hey everyone, thank you for listening to The Insurgents. If you want to subscribe to the show, you can find us on iTunes or Spotify or at Substack, theinsurgents.substack.com. You'll get the latest episodes delivered straight to your inbox, as well as our newsletter. On Twitter, we are at InsurgentsPod. Tweet at us, harass Ken in our replies, and then send us your hate mail to theinsurgentspod@gmail.com. Thank you once again for listening.